All right, welcome everyone back to our third talk of the day, of day 2 of Forward CloudSec. Our next session is going to be Laura Haller talking about cloud service provider partnership portals, a perfect storm of half-baked IAM controls, non-technical users, and permissions-hungry vendors. Before we begin, we'd like to just give a big thank you to all of our sponsors who make this event possible. In particular, we'd like to thank our bronze sponsor, ClearVector. ClearVector helps protect your production environment by examining runtime activity at the control plane inside cloud workloads such as VMs and containers and connected third-party SaaS apps such as GitHub. Our identity-driven approach enables you to detect and stop risky activity in seconds without needing to review logs to figure out who did it. Come see us in the vendor area and chat all things identity, endpoint, and cloud. With that, let's welcome Laura. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm so excited to talk to you today. This is my first time speaking at Forward CloudSec. I am a senior cloud security engineer at HashiCorp. All thoughts are my own, though. In my roughly decade-year-long of being in security, I've dabbled in all 3 clouds. So today, I'd like to speak to you about something that has forcibly piqued my interest on and off for about the last year. So let's dive in. With a show of hands, who here has ever heard of any of these portals? Okay, a decent number of you. Who here has actually managed the security of these portals? Okay, there's a lot less hands. So given that, there's clearly a little bit less of an understanding of what these are, or at least how to manage the security of these. So today we're going to level set. These are the 3 topics that I want you to understand. If I do my job well, you'll have a decent understanding of each of these. So the first is, what are partnership and marketplace portals? You've likely heard of marketplace portals, but maybe not partnership portals. The second one is, what does the security landscape look like in these portals? And of course, the last is, what are they doing well? What are they not doing well? So let's dive in. What are these portals? So marketplace portals are kind of where you consume offerings, right? If you have ever maybe if you're on the more consumer side of things, you've worked for a company that doesn't ship things to the marketplace, you at least know the marketplace is where you consume offerings. The partnership portals are kind of the business counterpart to the marketplace portals. It's where you handle, managing those offerings, depending on the cloud service provider, and a few other different fun things. Over the years, the non-technical and the technical side of these has kind of intermingled in a little bit of a weird way. You can tell by who uses them that it's a mix of non-technical and technical users, right? So you have things like the partnership teams whose job it is to work with the cloud service providers and build that relationship. You've got marketing, sales, and then you have your cloud engineering teams usually. And the cloud engineering teams help you build those marketplace offerings to ship out to customers. And then there's go-to-market vendors. If you've never heard of go-to-market vendors, they are exactly what they say they are. They help you go to market and sell your products, right? They help you identify your target audience. They help you, say, hey, when should we go to market? What's the best timing? And then they help you identify your, future sales opportunities. So for a little bit of backstory, from 2016 to about 2020, they mostly helped you kind of create your listings on the marketplace because apparently it was like a horrifically painful process. And then after that, they focused more on the data game. How can they encourage the propensity for things like a co-sell, where you sell with the cloud that you're selling on. So they're definitely very interested in the data that is in these portals. In general, these vendors have been, kind of advancing rapidly in the cloud space and not necessarily in a secure manner. So we will revisit go-to-market vendors in a bit, don't you worry. So again, a lot of valuable data in here. Why am I talking about this today? Why do we care? We can't get away with, we can't get away from them. This is where you sell your cloud marketplace offerings. So this is, we need to start treating it like what it really is. And this is part of our, cloud presence that we need to secure. So, as the sales-focused features have increased, they've added co-selling, private offerings, and other features. The security side of things hasn't really kept up. It's not to say that the security features don't exist, but they are perhaps less of the focus, right? The focus is on the sales side of things. You're probably wondering, okay, what does that mean? Let's dive into that first topic, or that second topic. what does the security landscape look like in each of these portals, starting with AWS? This is, the architecture of somebody, any company that is trying to sell on the marketplace. You have the AWS Partner Central, which is a completely separate portal. It's not an AWS account. It's not within an AWS org. It's just kind of out there on its own. Then the first thing you do when you say, hey, I would like to sell on the AWS marketplace, is you create a dedicated AWS account for the marketplace, and then you sign up within the AWS Marketplace Management portal. So a couple things to note here is the AWS Marketplace Management portal is also a separate portal. The same, you'll use the same flavor of credentials that you would to authenticate to the underlying AWS account. However, the portal is completely different, and there's no direct way to get from that underlying AWS account to the Marketplace Management portal. So it's kind of weird, especially if you have to assume a role. You got to go into the portal after you've already been into the AWS account. It's a weird setup. The thing to note here is that if you acquire a company, you also acquire this setup until you consolidate domains and offerings. I figure, maybe you haven't seen what these look like, these portals. These are sample images from AWS's blogs. At the top, there's AWS Partner Central, very hashtag business looking stuff. And then at the bottom, there's AWS Marketplace Management portal. And as you can tell, if you can see in the back, this is where you upload your container images, your AMIs, stuff like that to create your offerings. So we took a look at AWS. Let's take a look at Azure and see if there's any differences here. With AWS, a lot of the business side is in the partner center, and a lot of the more technical uploading of things happens in the AWS Marketplace Management portal. With Microsoft, it's all in one portal. This is a kind of a tangential portal similar to OpenAI or Azure DevOps, where it is still linked to a main Azure AD tenant, but it is, in general, a separate portal. Something to note is that whether or not you like it, every single AD user is automatically a default user within the Partner Center when you link that tenant. To be fair, it's just a default user, so they don't have any crazy amounts of access, but it's just something to keep in mind. There are a couple instances where you might have additional Azure AD tenants linked to your Partner Center. The first is if you are just a company with a lot of Azure AD tenants and you'd like to link them to the Partner Center, you may do so. You're also not required to do that, so you can leave them detached. The other situation is, of course, when you acquire a company, you acquire their Partner Center and you kind of absorb them. There's two caveats with acquiring a company that is selling on the marketplace. The first thing is that a global admin within the acquired company's Azure tenant has the ability to assign Partner Center roles to any user that is within their tenant, within the target Partner Center, the consolidated one. The other situation is that any users that had an elevated role within the Partner Center of the acquired company, when you combine them, they then have the same role in the final Microsoft Partner Center setup. So just a couple of things to kind of keep in mind when you acquire a company. And of course, this is what the portal looks like, a little bit of business, a little bit of technical side of things. So we've taken a look at architecture. Let's look at the little bits of control that we have here. In terms of login methods, it might surprise you, but for AWS Partner Central, it's just username and password at this time. There's no MFA, there's no Okta or anything integrations, it's just username and password. They are making a change to this. It is on the roadmap for next year, but for now, it's username and password, so keep that in mind. With AWS Marketplace Management portal, it is whatever flavor of authentication you use to get to the underlying AWS account. With Azure, it's kind of nice because it is a consistent experience. However, you're signing into your Azure AD tenant is the way that you would sign into this partnership portal. In terms of logging capabilities, with AWS, of course, you get the gold standard of CloudTrail, but keep in mind that a lot of the things that happen in these portals are considered data events, so they're not necessarily automatically logged to CloudTrail. So if there's something that you feel is very valuable to get logged, maybe just double check that it's logged to CloudTrail. And with Azure, there's two types of logs. Obviously, there's intro logs for this person is signed in, and then there is an audit logs API. When it comes to audit logs, It's different from Azure itself, because Azure, you can go and you've got a decent UI to at least kind of search through audit logs. Here, there's no UI. It is only a REST API that you can query. There's like a 90-day history. And if you don't like the REST API, the only SDK options you have are .NET, PowerShell, and Java. So a lot of you that are mostly dealing with Golang and Python might not be super enthused about that. You might also struggle to find like a SIEM that actually collects these sorts of logs. But okay, so we've taken a little bit of a look at the architecture of these portals, and we've taken a look at some of the controls. Let's dig deeper into the IAM role setup. So within AWS Partner Central, there's two things that I want you to glean from this image. The first is that of all the roles that exist here, there's no security role, there's no IT role. So what does that mean for us? Well, the only people who can remove users from this portal are the Alliance team members and the Alliance lead role. What that means is that those users that are non-technical and might not be up to date on who has left the company are in charge of managing somewhat of the security of these portals. So kind of keep that in mind. It's not great, especially when it's just username and password. These people aren't just dropping out of the portal. It is something where you actually have to actively remove them. The second thing is that the Alliance lead role is a bit of a single point of failure. It has access to do every single action that is on here. So, if this person were to leak their credentials, the only way that you could reassign this role or manage that leak is to submit an AWS support ticket, which it might take a while to kind of get back on that one, which also is not great. When we look at the Microsoft Partner Center, there's two subsets of roles that exist. There's ones that are kind of ported in from Azure, and then there's more Partner Center-based roles. So within the intra-based roles from Azure, you have global admin and user access admin, the norm. And then there's the subsets. You have the Partner Center roles, and then you have the commercial marketplace roles. The distinction is that the Partner Center roles are more about, the business side of things. And as you can tell, a lot of these are very sales speak terms. A lot of, personally, I feel like we would be hard pressed to find somebody in the audience today that could tell me exactly what is and is not in the scope of an AI Cloud Partner Program Partner Admin. And that's not a typo, that is the actual role name. So as cloud security engineers, we're used to a lot of like weird roles, weird IAM policies, but at this point, we're kind of beholden to whatever Azure gives us for RBAC. When we look at the marketplace roles, again, the commercial marketplace roles are more tied to, hey, we've got our marketplace offering, let's package it up and ship it out. What's interesting is that global admin is able to see every single AD user that is assigned one of these roles. However, it has zero visibility into AD applications, or if you come from like AWS, it's more like service users. No visibility into AD users that have been assigned marketplace roles. And you're probably like, oh, at this point, it's one of those things where these non-technical employees are expected to kind of manage the security, because clearly, as a global admin, we can't get any visibility into this. And if we try to get, manager or developer access just to kind of overcome this, then we get access to a lot of like sales data that we really should not have access to. So those are some things to kind of keep in mind. If you recall, I mentioned go-to-market vendors, kind of gave you a little bit of a preview. This is how they interact with these portals. Within the AWS Marketplace, now I am specifically calling out the AWS Marketplace, but they do also take part in a little bit of the Marketplace Management Portal and the Partner Center. So there's two things that they usually ask for. The first is a role to assume, and this comes straight from the documentation. A lot of them ask for a lot of wildcards. I'll leave it up to you and your partnership team and your cloud engineering team to say, how much access do these vendors actually really need? So that's something to keep in mind. The other thing that they ask for is usually a CloudFormation stack. And you're probably like, why do they need a CloudFormation stack? That's kind of weird. If you remember, I talked about how go-to-market vendors are very interested in the data that's in these portals. They want to help you sell better, so they want that sales data, right? There are two valuable sales-related data sets within the AWS Marketplace. The first one is the Commerce Analytics Service, or CAS. The second one is the Seller Delivery Data Service Feed, or SDDS. AWS, I really like how they do it. They give you a push-button way to kind of dump that information to S3. And then you can do whatever you want with it. That's where that CloudFormation stack comes in. The vendor usually comes in and says, hey, I'd love to see that data, can you just give it to me? Now that's not the worst thing in the world, but just it seems like a no-brainer, but make sure that your non-technical employees don't have permissions to just randomly, blindly deploy vendors' CloudFormation stacks. It might sound simple, but a lot of these vendors, they kind of give the vibes like, the sky is falling, we need this data, right? So just keep that in mind. When it comes to the Microsoft Partner Center, very similar, they'll ask for two things. The first is an AD application, and the second is an AD user. So, when it comes to the AD application, some vendors require static credentials that are uploaded to the vendor portal. Oh no, and some of them ask for federated credentials. It's really, you're really kind of beholden to whatever the vendor provides, so keep that in mind. The thing that they ask for in terms of access are these commercial marketplace roles, developer and manager. Some vendors ask for just developer, some ask for manager. The developer level of access allows you to kind of like create listings, and if that's something that you want your vendor to do, then that totally makes sense. You're probably wondering, why would they request manager access, and what can that possibly do? The manager level of access can do developer plus more. It can access and manage users, tenants, and roles in the Partner Center. Oh no, that sounds like something that vendors probably shouldn't have, right? The only reason why vendors ask for this specific piece of access is, if you recall, with AWS there's a very valuable data set. With Azure it's the same situation. They've got the Microsoft Insights data set. The manager role is the only role that can programmatically access that sales data set. There's no easy dumping to a bucket. It's just, if you want API access to this data, you have to get the manager role. So it's, again, it's one of those situations where the vendors are just working with the tools that they're given, and they aren't always the best tools. So as these portals become a lot more technically complex over time, they add sales features and all these things, and as these go-to-market vendors kind of start sinking their teeth deeper and deeper into these portals and trying to control what goes in and out of them, we as security professionals are being underserved when it comes to controls. When we do have controls, they might require us to get access to sales data that we probably shouldn't have access to. And then there's just spaces where we're just completely missing these controls. And because of that, these non-technical critical users, like our partnership teams, are expected to uphold the security of these portals. And of course, that's a very, very rough burden for them to shoulder. So how do we fix this, right? There's a couple next steps for cloud service providers that I'd like to see happen. The first thing is do what you do best, right? The cloud service providers, I know that they know how to create really robust IAM controls. They do it in the rest of the cloud. Ignore anything else that has already been said at Forward CloudSec. They're doing a great job. The next thing is support vendors safely. Give them the controls to do what they need to do without managing the security of these portals. They should not be doing that. And of course, support us, security teams. Give us the ability to do what we need to do, but also not manage any sort of sales data. That's not necessarily within our purview. And of course, the slide that you've all been waiting for, next steps for security practitioners. The biggest thing is make friends with your partnership team. Make sure that they're not Wild Westing these portals. If you're selling within AWS, probably step them through setting up a password manager, hopefully, until they add some more robustness there. Make sure that your non-technical employees don't have access to deploy stuff. Again, no-brainer, but just keep that in mind. And you'll want to review any users and vendors that have access to your partner centers and marketplaces. What does long-term access look like for them? And if they are maybe a vendor that you're trying to get off of at some point, do you have a plan for what does their access look like now? How do you get rid of it? And the last thing is give feedback to the cloud service providers. A lot of them, when it comes to this business portal, have never heard of hey, we would like to have audit logs. They're a little bit confused about that. So, if you see something, say something. If you want a functionality, please ask for it. It helps us all. So, thank you so much. I hope you learned about these weird little business, not business portals.
Great. Thank you very much, Laura. Do you have questions? Sure.
So thanks. I had been a seller on the marketplaces before, but hadn't seen the partner profiles, and realized this is going to be a great go-to anecdote about Conway's law applied to security. The structure of software reflects the structure of software development organizations. Here, the structure of security seems to reflect their org chart, and the fact this seems to be developed on each of these platforms kind of separately from core APIs and core services that the web CSPs sell. My question to you would be, well, the other cultural influence is the partners themselves. Like, is there a culture you found there of people expecting these to parallel account and partnership structure in Salesforce or in some other sort of system like Oracle or Workday? Like, what are they really doing this manually, or are they expecting maybe this to sync easily with other tools? Also things like Tackle.io or those other vendors who help you manage your marketplace listings. Is there some integration? Because this seems so manual, and I thought maybe you'd come across some other vendors who are working in this space.
If I understand your question right, there's a lot to unpack there. I think in terms of the user management side of things, right now it is just manual. I think there are some clouds, I think in GCP itself, they had a setup where Tackle could, there's like a few different like vendors, and Quasar as well, like a few different vendors can set up like identity control there, but GCP at least has made it so that you have to do certain like identity situations as of like 2024. So not the best answer, but I think for the most part it is manual right now.
This is wild. Thank you for showing that. I had never worked with any of these before, but I work with companies that do this, so now I'm going to go talk to all of them. Two questions for you real quick. One is, I noticed on the Azure side, or on the Microsoft side, there was that alliance team lead. Was that only one person could be that, or is that you could assign multiple people?
Yeah, so it was within AWS. The alliance lead, it can only be one user.
That's insane. Do you have any best practice recommendations for like user management in there? Like, is that something we should maybe think about doing, like a break glass account, or like just whoever is in charge of marketing is going to probably want that account anyways? I don't know. I don't know if you had any suggestions on management of that. Like from a security standpoint, if we need to have somebody that can if we inject IT into there, is it like, do we do that role or do we do the one below that? And if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, so the alliance lead role gets a lot of access, and you also get like a lot of different emails. You get like all of the sales emails that come through. So it's one of those situations where you want somebody to be able to monitor the important emails that come through. And I know certain alliance lead members don't like getting hounded by all these different emails, because you might also get vendor inquiries through that as well. The AWS best practice is to have one user that is your actual alliance lead team member, and that's kind of it. I'd like to see it get better over time, but that's the current status.
Thank you.
One question I had is there a risk to consumers of products from the marketplace, and like how should we think about that, and how do we protect ourselves on that side?
Yeah, so I think there was an article from 2023 where an AWS marketplace offering was shipped out with Monero cryptocurrency or crypto mining. So the risk is real. AWS, at least I know them, they've gotten a little bit better. A lot of the clouds are very secretive about all the processes that kind of go into, hey, we have validated your offering, it is safe to sell. But yeah, the consideration is, maybe double check kind of what offerings are going out on what frequency, because AWS and Azure and GCP, they'll do their best, but might not be perfect.
So I saw you talking of AWS, of Microsoft also. My question was, have you delved into GCP? You sort of answered that a little bit with the first question, but do you have anything to say about the Google version of the partnership portal?
Yeah, so the GCP Partner Hub, their documentation is not public, so a little sad about that. They, like I said before, they do kind of have some cloud identity setup that is now mandated as of, I think, April or earlier of 2024. I do think that some vendors, they do want like a GCP deployment manager stack, but I haven't had as much time to kind of dive into that portal.
And one last question. What do you have? Right, great.
You had mentioned audit logging for CloudTrail. I'm wondering if that is done in the partnership central or and is it done like inside for AWS, or is it done inside of the partnership portal?
Yeah, so there is the opportunity for CloudTrail logging both within the AWS Partner Central as well as the AWS Marketplace Management Portal, especially because it's got an underlying AWS account. But I'm uncertain of all of the things that actually get logged at CloudTrail at this point. I do have a call with AWS set up to kind of dig into that a little bit deeper.
All right, and that's all we have time for. Thank you once again, Laura, for such an enlightening talk.